Hi, I'm Nora. And on Thanksgiving, my sister raised her glass and exposed my $32,500,000 0 cents fortune like it was party trivia. The moment her words landed, I felt the air shift, as if she'd ripped open a vault I'd spent years guarding. The room froze. Then came the questions, not about my well-being, not about how I got there, just demands sharp, shameless, about funding her dreams, her baby, her future. I sat there cornered in my parents' house and realized they'd never celebrated me. They'd only ever waited for their payday. That betrayal cut deeper than any silence I'd endured, a wound I hadn't seen coming. And that night, I gave them a gift they never expected. Before we dive in, what's the coldest thing your family's ever done to you? Drop it in the comments. You won't believe how this ends. I pulled into the driveway 10 minutes late, but the house was already lit up like it had been expecting guests for hours. Through the front window, I could see silhouettes shifting in and out of frame, arms raised in laughter, glasses clinking. I took a breath before stepping out of the car, my heels sinking slightly into the wet gravel. Thanksgiving at my parents' house in Asheville, North Carolina hadn't changed. Same porch lights, same wreath, same cold. Inside, the dining room was already full. Every seat taken, except the one right next to the swinging kitchen door, where steam puffed out in bursts every time it creaked open. Even the cousins' kids had better placement. I stood at the threshold a beat too long before my father waved from the head of the table. "There she is," he said. "Grab a chair, Nora." As if one had been saved for me. I sat down quietly, trying not to bump the tray of buttered rolls beside me. The chair leg wobbled, uneven. I steadied myself, smoothed the hem of my sweater dress, and tried to fade into the linen tablecloth like I'd learned to do at 17. I was the youngest daughter, always the quiet one. Not by nature really, but by need. When you grow up with a sister like Lydia, who could win a room just by flipping her hair or crying at the right moment, you learn there's less space for silence. I'd moved to Seattle 12 years ago, started a software company, left it, built a second, sold it, developed a third. Still, when I came home for the holidays, I was just Nora, the one who didn't FaceTime enough, who sent gift cards instead of showing up to baby showers. They saw me as a shadow, useful only when they needed something. I sipped water from the stemmed glass in front of me. The condensation left a faint ring on the cloth. No one asked me about Washington or about work or whether I was seeing someone, not even out of politeness, until Lydia stood up. She clinked her spoon against her champagne flute with the kind of practiced elegance only she could pull off while wearing a $3,000 0 cents dress. "I just want to say," she began, placing a hand gently on Dad's shoulder, "how grateful I am that we're all here together. It's been a tough year for some of us, and I know not everyone could make it, but I think it's beautiful when family shows up." A few aunts nodded. My cousin, Tessa, snapped a picture on her phone. But you know what's wild? Lydia's smile grew sharper as she glanced at me. It's how someone who never says a word at these dinners, who always seems so private, could be sitting on nearly $33 million, 0 cents. Her revelation was a calculated strike, meant to expose and exploit me in one breath. Forks froze mid-air, glasses paused, half raised. "She sold her third tech patent last quarter," Lydia added, tone syrupy. I Googled it. Real estate filings, company exit, everything. I mean, Nora, why so shy? My pulse didn't spike. My shoulders didn't rise. I just looked at her and then at my father, who blinked like he'd misheard. My mother's mouth opened before any sound came out. "Wait, is that true?" she asked finally. I didn't answer. "We could have used your help," my father said, his voice low but carrying. "Lydia's art gallery still hasn't taken off. She's trying to do good. Why didn't you tell us?" His question wasn't curiosity, it was an accusation, as if I'd hoarded something that belonged to them. I looked down at my napkin. There was a faint stain from the cranberry sauce. My mother leaned forward. "You always wanted to feel included, right? Maybe this is your chance. You could help your sister, help all of us." Something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. More like heat rising behind a closed door. They didn't ask how I'd built that money, or what it had cost, or if I was okay being across the country alone most holidays. They just saw dollar signs and decided it meant I owed them something. Family supports family, Lydia added. We all pitch in where we can. She meant I should pitch in where she couldn't. I reached for my glass of water again. The ice had nearly melted. As I lifted it, my bracelet caught the light. Platinum, understated. A gift I'd bought for myself the day after my second sale. A reminder I never needed anyone's permission to succeed. I took a sip. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. The silence from dinner didn't linger. It shattered like it always did in this house once plates were cleared and someone shouted, "Let's do gift," like they were saving us all from a fire. People shuffled toward the tree, laughing, bumping into one another, pretending nothing awkward had happened at the table. I stayed seated for a moment, watching them. My hands still smelled faintly of roasted garlic and rosemary. Eventually, I stood and followed. The living room had changed little over the years. Same faded plaid armchairs, same over-decorated tree with clashing ornaments from too many eras. The youngest cousins were already tearing through their presents, ribbons and paper flying like confetti. My mother passed around gifts with speed, calling names with sugary brightness. Dad stood off to the side, sipping brandy from a glass he only used during the holidays. Someone pressed a small box into my hand. To the label read, "No handwriting, no tag, no card, just the letter." I looked up. No one was looking back at me, not even Lydia. I opened the box carefully, more out of habit than anticipation. Tissue paper rustled inside. At the bottom, nestled against the corner, was a silver frame. Inside it, a photo. The family. All of them. It was Lydia's college graduation, an event I hadn't been able to attend because I was pitching a prototype to a panel of investors in Portland. My absence hadn't been subtle back then, and now it was literal. I wasn't in the photo. Not cropped, not blurred, just not there. Lydia turned slightly, clearly waiting for a reaction. "We thought it was symbolic," she said, smiling like she was doing me a kindness. "You're always so private anyway." But look, vintage wood frame. It's real walnut. Her gift was a deliberate erasure, a cruel reminder I'd never been part of their story. No one laughed. No one objected either. That made it worse. I held the frame steady, but my fingers were tense. The edges pressed into my skin, reminding me I was real even if I wasn't in their version of the story. And then it hit me. Christmas, 12 years ago. I'd flown in last minute, late because of a delayed flight. I hadn't planned to stay long, but I wanted to try. Someone handed me a photo album that Lydia had made, a scrapbook of family memories. It had a leather cover and little notes written in gold ink under each picture. Every page featured them. Birthdays, lake trips, school dances, even candid breakfasts. In some shots I was there but half cropped out. In most, I was missing entirely. When I asked about it, Lydia shrugged. "You're always off doing your own thing. We used the best shots we had." That dismissal had stung, but I'd buried it, hoping one day they'd see me. I'd smiled, nodded, set the album down, and never brought it up again. I blinked back to the present as Dad chuckled over something in his hand. Another gift? Some golf-themed mug from a cousin. He looked over his shoulder at me and said casually, as if commenting on the weather, "You've always been the one who didn't need anything. It's time you gave back." It wasn't cruel. That was the part that got me. It wasn't even meant to sting, just a belief like gravity. Nora is fine. She always figures it out. She doesn't need celebration or space or acknowledgement, just money. And I'd given it. I thought back. Lydia's rent 4 years ago when she was finding herself between fellowships. My mom's unexpected surgery bill when the insurance claim got denied. Dad's car repair during the worst snowstorm. None of them asked for help in front of others. It was always whispered, always behind a closed door, and always forgotten. They didn't say thank you. They didn't even remember. They just thought, "She can." I looked back down at the frame. A line of light caught the corner of the glass. My grip had tightened without me noticing. There was a thin fracture now running diagonally across the photo. right through Lydia's shoulder. No one saw it. They gave me a picture, I thought, of a family I was never in and asked me to fund the sequel. I placed the box back down on the carpet beside me, gently. My hand rested on top of it for a moment too long. The party rolled on. More gifts were exchanged. More drinks were poured. The tree glowed warm. But I sat there, framed, silent, cracked. By the time everyone had retreated to their rooms and the house finally fell quiet, the clock in the hallway struck midnight. I climbed the stairs slowly, barefoot, carrying only the thin box with the cracked picture frame. Inside my old room, nothing had really changed. The wallpaper still held a faint scent of cedar, mixed with my mother's vintage perfume, rose, and something powdery. A few old yearbooks still leaned against the shelf, and the corkboard on the wall held faded pushpins, but no pictures. I set the frame down on the desk, then sat in the chair I hadn't touched in years. I pulled open the bottom drawer. That drawer was my time capsule. Old report cards, dried-out pens, a cracked stress ball I used during finals week in college. But tucked in the back, beneath a folder labeled Scholarships, was a folded envelope. I knew exactly what it was before I touched it. 6 years ago, I wrote a letter to my parents. I remember the night sitting in my apartment, exhausted. After helping Lydia pay off her third bounced loan from the art startup, she ran into the ground. I never sent the letter. I didn't even seal it. But I kept it. I unfolded the pages, the edges slightly curled. I'm tired of being the scaffolding that holds up a house no one lets me live in. Reading it now, the words felt like a cry I'd stifled too long, a truth they'd forced me to hide. That was the first line. Back then I'd worried it sounded bitter. Dramatic, as Mom would say. Usually right before she dismissed something that actually mattered. But tonight it sounded almost too gentle. I leaned back, resting the letter against my knee. My mind wandered to a dorm hallway years ago, Lydia crying into her phone. Something about a billing error. Her financial aid hadn't processed and she was going to lose her classes. I was 23, working overnight shifts at a tech lab while studying for my coding certifications. I maxed out my credit card to cover her tuition. Dad said it was the right thing to do. "You're older," he'd told me. "She's still finding herself." But I wasn't older by much, just 2 years, and I was already expected to carry her even then. The letter in my hands felt heavier. My thoughts drifted again, this time to 2013. Our mother had collapsed at work. Stress, they said, or maybe something with her thyroid. I was in a product launch meeting across the country. I didn't even make it to the hospital. But I wired the money for the surgery that insurance didn't cover. And at every dinner since, when she talked about how my girls were there for me, she looked at Lydia. Always Lydia, because she sat by her bedside, because she brought flowers. Never mind that the bill came to $9,200.00 and I paid $7,500.00 of it. They erased my sacrifices, rewriting history to make me invisible. I looked back at the letter in my lap. For 6 years I'd been afraid to send it, afraid of what it might ruin, but I was beginning to see that everything had already fractured. A soft sound in the hallway made me freeze. Footsteps, then a whisper through the door, light and casual, like nothing had happened earlier. "Hey," Lydia said. "You know they're going to ask you about Breckenridge soon. That house co-signing, just say yes now. It'll be easier." Her presumption was a final insult, assuming I'd bend to their demands as always. I didn't answer. I didn't even move. But something in me clicked. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even shock. It was like a lock turning inside me, slow and deliberate. I stood and walked over to my suitcase, pulled out my laptop, sat back at the desk and opened QuickBooks. The folder was still there. 20111202. 4 family expenses. I clicked line after line. $3,000, 0 cents. Emergency loan, not repaid, $4,100, 0 cents. Lydia's retreat to Bali for mental clarity, $5,600, 0 cents. Mom's therapy sessions, $11,200, 0 cents. Car replacement for Dad after the crash, $27,000, 0 cents. Lydia's company debt absorption, $9,200, 0 cents. Surgery copay, $3,500, 0 cents. Bailout for Uncle Miles' tax error, $2,800, 0 cents. Funeral expenses for Grandma, split among the siblings, only I paid. Scroll, scroll, scroll. At the very bottom, in bold, $0, 0 cents. Acknowledgement. I stared at that number. You don't realize how cold it feels until your love is turned into accounting. There's something strange about remembering your generosity in spreadsheets. It makes the love feel itemized. Sleep never really came. I laid in bed, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling while the dim hallway light bled under my door. Eventually the cold drove me up. I slipped on an old sweatshirt and headed downstairs. Outside the front windows the snow was untouched, white, quiet, perfect. Inside it was anything but. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast. My mother stood by the counter pouring coffee into her favorite floral mug like it was any other day. Like the night before hadn't happened. Like my bank statements weren't echoing louder than her voice ever had. She didn't greet me. Didn't even glance my way. I poured myself water from the fridge, the silence between us hanging thicker than the steam rising from her cup. Footsteps followed a few seconds later. Lydia entered, full makeup already on, not a hair out of place. She set a yellow legal pad on the counter in front of me. The top read, 2025 Family Planning, below that handwritten in blue gel pen. Item 1. Breckenridge Mortgage Proposal, Nora. I looked at her. She was buttering a bagel. You wrote my name, I said quietly. She didn't look up. They'll bring it up today. I just thought I'd prep you. I held the pad for a beat, my thumb pressed hard against the edge. Prep me? I repeated, slower this time. You're the one who's good with money. Everyone says that, she added, finally looking over with a half smile. Come on, this is your chance to make a real impact. Her casual entitlement ignited a fury I'd suppressed for years. The words settled in the pit of my stomach. From the table, my mother chimed in as she stirred cream into her coffee. You've always been good with numbers, Nora. Maybe this is your way of contributing since you're not as present. Not present. Not present. I'd been paying for their presence while disappearing in plain sight. I almost laughed, not the amused kind. The kind you'd let out when you're standing over your own grave. Then came the familiar rustle of a newspaper. My father's voice followed, half buried behind the front page. Let's not make this another one of your episodes. His dismissive tone was the final straw, confirming I'd been a means, not a daughter. That stopped me cold. I hadn't cried in front of them since 2013 when I showed up to Grandma's funeral in scrubs, having driven overnight from a double shift. They said I was being dramatic when I excused myself halfway through the reception. I folded the notepad and handed it back to Lydia. You want me to co-sign for Breckenridge, I said, but none of you have even acknowledged what I've already given. My mother sighed and reached for a croissant. We all give in different ways, sweetie. My father lowered the paper just enough to add, not everything's about keeping score. Lydia leaned on the counter with a glib smile. Honestly, Nora, you make everything so heavy. You've always been like that. Heavy. Invisible, but heavy. I stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked back upstairs without another word. The pad of my socks made no sound on the carpeted stairs. I closed my door quietly behind me and sat back at the desk. The document was still open on my laptop. Line after line of itemized love. I clicked print. Once the printer stopped humming, I slid the papers into a clean envelope and wrote across the front, if I'm not seen, at least I'll be read. I held it for a second, then walked back downstairs. The living room was still quiet. No one had come in yet. The fireplace was dark, the stockings limp and forgotten. I walked to the mantel. There was a framed photo there. Lydia's wedding, taken 6 years ago. Everyone was smiling. I was technically in it, at the far end, barely visible, cropped halfway out by a decorative plant. I placed the envelope beside the frame, straightened it, walked away. I didn't come here to start a war, but sometimes the ones you love corner you into becoming the fire. Lydia knocked once, then cracked my door without waiting. Dad wants to talk about some things, she said, like it was no big deal. Her voice floated in casually, too casual considering how she was still wearing yesterday's makeup and that knowing smirk. I tucked the QuickBooks file back into my laptop and closed the lid. Things, I echoed, standing slowly. Of course. Downstairs, the living room had been rearranged like we were preparing for a negotiation. My father sat at the head of the coffee table, shoulders squared like he was chairing a board meeting. My mother perched at the armrest, her hand resting gently on Lydia's back. Lydia held her tea with both hands, eyes locked on me. No one offered a seat. I stood anyway. Dad cleared his throat. Let's not dance around it. This house will be yours one day, Nora. A pause. Too long. But right now, he added, Lydia and her baby need support, and we're all in agreement that helping family is what matters. Their unified front was a betrayal, demanding I sacrifice for a family that excluded me. I glanced at Lydia's stomach. She wasn't showing yet, not visibly, but the timing was convenient. Mom chimed in, her voice smooth as a marketing pitch. Think of it as a down payment on your legacy. Your contribution now makes space for the family's future. Legacy, I repeated under my breath, then louder. That's one way to put it. Dad leaned forward. We just want to ensure everyone's taken care of. You've got the resources, and Lydia, she's at a turning point. Lydia nodded along like a bobblehead. You mean I've got money, I said evenly, and Lydia has need. Mom's smile faltered. Well, we're not saying it like that. We're just saying you've already received so much, honey. Have I? I asked. She looked relieved I'd opened that door. Your college tuition? That used Honda we gave you for grad school? The Paris trip for graduation? I was 23, I cut in. Everything you've mentioned happened before I was old enough to rent a car. My father folded his arms. You wouldn't even have what you do now without our sacrifices. Lydia looked amused. I mean, come on, Nora. We all know you've had a leg up. I walked toward the mantel without a word, picked up the envelope, took my time. Then, in full view of all three, I unfolded the pages and began reading. My contributions to this family by year, I began, my voice calm, steady, too even for the pulse pounding in my chest. 2012, Lydia's vet bills, $4,200, 0 cents. 2017, down payment on Breckenridge property, $30,000, 0 cents. I didn't pause for effect. I didn't raise my voice. 2020, Dad's IRS lien, $20,000, 0 cents. Quietly settled. 2022, Lydia's startup loan, $28,000, 0 cents. I looked up. No one spoke. I didn't ask for thanks. I said, I never sent an invoice, but don't sit here and act like I've done nothing just because I didn't frame it like a favor. My father looked like someone had pulled the air out of him. My mother blinked, then quickly adjusted her robe, like she needed to feel in control of something. But Lydia rolled her eyes. You make money off investments, Nora. That's not the same as struggling. You don't know what it's like to be scared about how to feed a baby. I stared at her. No, but I do know what it's like to starve emotionally in a house full of people who think silence is loyalty. They didn't get it. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. I lowered the papers and took a deep breath. I saw the draft will in your drawer, Mom. She flinched just slightly, but it was enough. My name's not on it anymore. That discovery was a gut punch, proof they'd planned to erase me entirely. The silence that followed felt cavernous. Dad's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Lydia didn't even bother hiding her smirk this time. I stepped back, folding the papers again, tucking them into my coat pocket. You don't have to explain, I said. I've already rewritten what I thought I knew. I grabbed my bag from the stair rail, slid into my coat. No one moved to stop me, until... Don't do this, my father said sharply, voice low and warning. You'll regret breaking up the family. I turned at the door. You already did that, I replied. I just finally noticed. Then I left. The next morning, I walked in through the side door, documents in my bag, heels clicking sharp against the tile, coat still buttoned against the cold. I made sure the sound of my entrance was loud enough to carry. Lydia looked up from her seat at the kitchen island. She was sipping something green from a glass straw and had that smug half-smile that always came when she thought she'd won. "You came to your senses?" she said, barely glancing up. I didn't answer right away. I set my bag down on the counter and unzipped it calmly, deliberately. "I came," I said, pulling out the first folder to get what's mine. That caught her attention. From the front room, my father's voice called out, "What's going on in there?" "Don't worry," I replied without turning. "I'll explain it all." I motioned to the man standing behind me, my attorney. He was quiet, early 50s, hair slicked back, glasses fogged from the cold. He didn't speak until I handed him the first file. "Lydia," he said, addressing Lydia formally, "this contains records showing you illegally moved funds from your sister's trust into a joint account under false pretense without her knowledge." Lydia stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "I didn't—" He continued, flipping through pages. Item 2, credit card debt built posthumously through a shared business account that listed Nora as the primary guarantor. Over $42,000, 0 cents in unauthorized charges. My father stepped in then, his tone demanding, "Where did you get this?" My lawyer answered calmly, "Wire transfers, digital authorization records, and this," he held up a signed document, "was filed under your IP address, sir." Dad's face paled. "And I've filed formal charges for identity theft," I said. "You'll get the letters this week." Their shock was palpable, but it couldn't undo the years of their deceit. My mother had appeared now too, still in her robe, her lips slightly parted, like she hadn't decided which version of herself to present yet. Concerned mother or outraged matriarch? I handed her a separate envelope. "This one's for you." She opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the document and then her hand jerked. "This house," I said, "legally belongs to me." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "You refinanced it 4 years ago? Using my business without consent? That's fraud," Mom faltered. "You wouldn't do this," Lydia hissed, her voice cracking. I looked her dead in the eye. "I already did." Silence fell so heavily you could hear the fridge humming behind us. Lydia's face shifted, defiance collapsing into desperation. Her eyes welled up, and before I could take a breath, she stood and lunged forward. "You're my sister," she said, her arms reaching for me. "Please don't do this. Don't tear us apart." I stepped back. "You called me a walking ATM at Christmas, remember?" My voice was low, clear. "You told people I just write checks." Her hypocrisy was infuriating, a desperate act to salvage her scheme. "That was a joke." "No," I interrupted. "It was the first honest thing you've said in years." My mother clutched the envelope tighter, still not speaking. My father ran a hand through his thinning hair and muttered something I didn't catch. I turned, picked up the final folder from my bag, walked to the dining table, and laid it down gently right on top of the holiday centerpiece. No one followed. Inside the folder, copies of every email, bank transfers, proof of the wire fraud, credit card screenshots, IRS liens, and on the top page, a handwritten note. "This was my final deposit into your lives. Don't spend it all in one place." As I turned to leave, no one stopped me. I opened the door myself, stepped into the cold, and closed it behind me. Not softly, not gently. The sound echoed louder than anything I'd ever said in that house. I hadn't even taken my coat off when the first voicemail played. "Hey, Nora, this is Vince from Nexus Ventures. I just got some messages. Did you really forge tax documents? There's talk about an audit. I need clarity." I stood there in the center of my living room, staring at my phone like it had just turned into a weapon. Another voicemail clicked in. "Nora, call me back immediately. This can't be true, but investors are nervous. Someone said you embezzled money." My chest tightened. I walked to the kitchen, set the phone down, and poured myself some water with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. A dozen more messages followed, variations on a theme. Hesitation, accusation, doubt. Then came the email, forwarded by a colleague. The subject line read, "FYI, anonymous source." The message included screenshots, fake letterheads using my old company's branding, claims that I'd stolen from the organization. Attached was a file titled IRS Audit 2024. Clearly forged, sloppy, but believable to the untrained eye, and the sender, no name, just a random Gmail. But the signature smelled familiar. It was the kind of mess only Lydia and my mother could have brewed together. Sweet, polite wording, little passive-aggressive phrases like, "It's tragic when someone so gifted spirals." Their smear campaign was a desperate attempt to discredit me, but it only fueled my resolve. That afternoon, my publicist texted, "You're trending on a tech podcast. Lydia said you were struggling emotionally for years." I sat down slowly. "They're rewriting my life again," I whispered. This wasn't just a character smear. It was strategic, coordinated. It had the fingerprints of two people who'd always known how to make me doubt myself and now wanted everyone else to do it too. By 4:00 p.m., another message popped up on my company's internal Slack. Someone had called an emergency board meeting. The words, "transition leadership," were flagged in a screenshot one of my old teammates sent. The pit in my stomach turned to heat. Lydia had taken my silence as an invitation. She'd gone into the one place I'd kept sacred, our childhood company, and painted me as unstable. Again, I didn't RSVP to the board meeting. I showed up. The conference room was glass-walled, with beige chairs arranged in a neat half-circle. I arrived 10 minutes after they started, holding a thin black folder. Lydia's eyes widened the moment she saw me. "Oh," she said, brushing invisible lint from her blouse. "We didn't expect." I didn't speak, just walked to the table. The room quieted as I placed the folder down, opened it. Inside a copy of the forged audit, emails traced to my father's IP address, timeline of funds rerouted from my company account to Lydia's gallery's emergency fund, and a letter addressed to the board. "If you attempt to erase me again, I will drag this entire table into the daylight." I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. I just looked around at the faces, people I'd worked with, mentored, some I'd helped during their lowest points. They couldn't look me in the eye. Lydia cleared her throat. "This is being taken out of context." I slid a flash drive across the table. "That's the context." No one spoke. I left the meeting without saying goodbye, drove home with the windows down. Even though the air was icy, I needed it to stay awake, because for the first time, I realized just how far my own family would go to silence me. I walked through my front door just after sunset. The house was still quiet. I plugged in my phone to charge and washed my hands, trying to rinse the weight of that day off my skin. Then the phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Text only. You should have stayed the silent one. Get ready." The threat was a chilling confirmation of their ruthlessness, but I was done being their victim. The envelope was thin, pale yellow, folded too neatly for something so absurd. It was the kind a leasing office handed out when your package had been signed for or when your rent was late. But this wasn't that. The concierge handed it over as if it were just another Thursday memo. "This came in certified this morning," she said, not meeting my eyes. I took it, opened it, and the second I saw the heading restraining order, I had to sit down. Filed by my own mother, it stated in the most sterile legal ease that I was barred from attending the upcoming Elliott family Thanksgiving gala, that my presence was deemed emotionally disruptive, potentially erratic, and my favorite, dangerously vindictive. The language read like it was drafted by someone who'd never once asked how I was doing, only what I could give. I nearly laughed, not out of humor, but the sheer exhaustion of it all. "My silence was their biggest fear," I muttered. By noon, Lydia had posted a video. She wore white, of course, hair pulled into a soft bun, holding a mug that said, "Joy." Her voice had that tight gentleness that only people who love being passive-aggressive could perfect. "I know the holidays are hard," she said, voice trembling just enough for sympathy. "But some people, when given success, they forget who they are. They forget their family. But I choose healing. I choose light. I choose forgiveness." The caption, "Family first, in arrange sister, in a choose peace." The comments were flooded. "Stay strong, Lydia. Your sister sounds toxic. This is why boundaries matter." I got a message from my old assistant. It was a voice note recorded inside the Elliott Gala planning session. "She's not to be mentioned," someone said. "We don't want the press asking questions." Another chimed in, "Keep her name off the donor wall." Even my legacy was on mute. So, I did the only thing they didn't expect anymore. I showed up that night. I arrived 10 minutes before the doors opened. I didn't slip in. I walked tall, dressed in a deep burgundy gown that fell just below my ankles. No jewelry, no statement earrings, didn't need props. At the front table, I smiled at the hostess and handed her a sleek black USB. For the slideshow, I said, "Legacy donors." She took it with a nod, slipped it into the laptop without a second glance. Inside the ballroom sparkled. Gold runners, poinsettia centerpieces, waiters in black ties. I spotted old professors, a few investors, local press, all of them sipping champagne and waiting for the program to begin. I stood near the back, arms folded. When the screen lit up and the music started, the first slide was innocent enough. Photos from past galas. Then came the video. It began with a timestamp, then my father's face. I signed those forms. Nora had nothing to do with the company's transfer of assets. It was me. I pressured her to stay quiet. She didn't want any of this. He looked off camera, uneasy. Next, a notarized document flashed onto the screen, confirming me as the original founder, sole legal owner, and primary donor of the organization. Then the receipts. Bank transfers from the company account to an entity under Lydia's name. Flights billed to the charity card. A salon invoice for nearly $5,000, 0 cents, listed under Mental Wellness Retreat. The room went silent. Someone dropped a fork. I heard it hit the marble. Lydia gasped. "Turn it off!" she shrieked, but it was too late. She lunged at the laptop. A woman from the event team pulled her back. My mother stumbled. Her hand flew to her chest, and then she fainted, right there in the middle of the Elliott family gala. A voice from the crowd cried out, "Is this true?" I stepped forward. "I never needed applause," I said, keeping my words anymore. My words were a declaration, shattering their carefully crafted lies. No one moved. I turned, heels echoing on the ballroom floor, passing a line of stunned faces, past the cameras, past the whispers. And then I saw him. My former fiancé. He stood at the corner of the bar, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. As I walked past, he called out just loud enough, "Nora, can we talk?" I paused just outside the gala, the wind catching the hem of my dress. His voice had cracked something open, but not in the way he might have hoped. He took a slow step forward, hesitant, the glimmer of the chandelier caught in his eyes. "I was scared of your light," he said, voice low, "of what it showed me about my shadows." For a long breath, I didn't say a word. I just watched him. This man who once called me too intense, too focused, too quiet for the life he wanted, and then I nodded. "I wish you healing," I said evenly, "but I'm not your rehab." His plea was too late, a weak attempt to reclaim what he'd abandoned. He didn't respond. Just stood there, hands in his pockets like he still didn't know what to do with them. I walked away this time fully. No second glances, no hope left in my chest, waiting for someone to chase after me. That chapter, like so many others tonight, was closed. When I got home, I tossed my clutch onto the counter and pulled my heels off, letting them thud softly to the floor. In the quiet that followed, I reached into my coat pocket and took out a single folded napkin. It was from the gala, embossed with gold leaf trim, exactly like the ones they'd always used. Only this time, where my name used to be printed next to Lydia's on the table cards, it was blank. I smoothed it flat on the kitchen counter. "Funny," I whispered. It took removing my name for me to finally own it. I didn't light candles, I didn't put music on. I just sat there with the napkin in front of me, like a strange kind of peace offering. From who? I wasn't sure. Around 11, I heard the soft slide under my door. I rose and walked over. Another envelope. no return address, no frills, but I knew the handwriting instantly. It was my father's. Neat, sharp at the corners, like he was still trying to control the space around each letter. Inside was a short note. No apology, no warmth, just a simple statement. I've submitted the resignation paperwork to the company's board, effective immediately. Voting rights, 51%, and executive authority transferred to Nora Elliott per original charter. Attached was a notarized copy. I stood there for a while, the paper trembling in my hands, but I didn't cry. Not from relief, not from regret. This wasn't justice, I said aloud, setting the documents into my drawer. It was just acknowledgement. His concession was a hollow victory, too late to mend what they'd broken. And somehow, that was enough. The next day, I met my former assistant for lunch at a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a barber shop. She brought along someone new, an intern she was mentoring. The girl reminded me of myself at 21. Wide eyes, fast hands, hope held together by ambition. Halfway through our coffee, she asked me, "Do you ever regret not speaking up earlier?" I stirred my spoon in slow circles. "I used to think staying quiet made me the bigger person," I said gently. "Now I know silence is only power when you choose it." I'd spent years pouring into others, afraid to claim space, afraid to be called difficult, dramatic, ungrateful. That fear had cost me a lot, but not anymore. By evening, I was back at my desk, surrounded by boxes of old proposals, new mission drafts, and company documents waiting to be born again, this time with no edits but mine. My new foundation didn't carry the Elliott name, it carried mine. No hidden credits, no shadow signatures, just one name, Nora. And it was enough. That night I opened the window, letting the November chill snake through the room. Snowflakes brushed the ledge. Thanksgiving lights blinked from a neighbor's porch. I stood there for a moment, arms folded, heart still. "My name won't be erased again," I whispered. Not from papers, not from rooms, and not from myself. The cold swept in, but I didn't shut it out. I was still standing. This time, I stayed.